This is Main Street with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to Main Street. Gary Allen with you, and we have a great show lined up for you this afternoon. Two of our good friends in sports have joined us this afternoon, but I want to first of all thank the Japanese Gardens of Miami for their continued support of this program. Dave, along with Tommy Smith, who is our producer on board and on the property, as well as the executive producer of this program, Rick Del Vecchio. We've got a great show for you this afternoon. I hope everybody's well from the last time that we got together. And this afternoon, without further ado, let me bring on Mr. Dave Lamont, ESPN Pro Bowlers Tour. Also, Mr. Jeff Deforest from the Defo Show with Luby.
Yeah, you got to get Luby's name in there. That's for
I always want to say
recognized around the world, universally recognized.
He has one of the most unique voices I've ever heard.
You know, it's funny about that. A good friend of mine who I had a lot of success with on the airwaves and became a very popular guy. We knew him as the Polyman, Paul Massell, and we did a lot of stuff together over the years. And he had, the thickest New York accent you could possibly have. And Dave, you can relate to this when they used to tell you, hey, you sound too regional. You're not going to be able to work here if you're going to sound like that. And this guy, the worst. You could tell he wasn't from Indiana. Yeah. But it was such a distinct voice that it works. And I think you're finding that maybe that's the way to go. The more unusual your voice, the more chances you have to be recognized. And Luby, who and you can relate to this also, Dave, you were working in the same place where the program director, Ken Charles, came running down the hall, and he said, if you ever let that man crack a microphone open again on your show, you're fired. This was a couple of days into my tenure at WIOD. We lasted like 14 years there. And, of course, Luby developed into not just a viable sidekick, but a guy that gained his own measure of popularity. So, I think having a unique voice can be an asset in this game.
I think so. And you know what? We all know what we feel about PDs,
Fortunately, he was gone quickly after he gave me that order because I wasn't going to abide by it because it's kind of strange to have a guy that you're working with and you can't bounce anything off of him. But that was the thing. Everybody wanted a classic voice. Dave maybe has one of the great voices of all time in broadcasting. You know right away that this guy's a real broadcaster when he starts speaking.
Lamont should be still doing University of Miami football games. I don't care what anybody says, anytime, anywhere, any place. You should be still doing UM games compared to the guy that's doing it now. Nothing against Zagacki.
No, nothing against him at all. Apparently,
Oh my!
Nothing at all against him.
I like Joe. Hey. Joe got me started in and kind of launched me on a nice long run in talk radio. So, I will never have a disparaging word about the man. But as far as play-by-play voices go, not in the same category as Dave Lamont.
Lamont is the best. There always was, always will be. I want to begin the program off with someone that the three of us knew very well. I knew him because of my brother Michael. I also knew him because my other brother lived in Kendall, and we would see him from time to time. The triad of running backs for the Miami Dolphins, 17-0 team, is now dwindled down to one with Larry Zonka. We lost Mercury Morris over the weekend at 77 years old, 77 years young, as far as I'm concerned. They didn't say why he passed away. It's not important why he passed away, but he was a major contributor to the 17-0 season. My brother even said many times, if they didn't have Mercury Morris, that outside threat, that who knows, maybe they wouldn't have gone 17-0. But he was something else again. To me, he was a total gentleman, always a big smile on his face, always, hey, how's your brother doing? And other things. When I came home from my first tour in Vietnam and I was at the Orange Bowl, they were home playing who knows who. I happened to have tickets in the end zone. He saw me and he pointed at me, came over. He said, how was it? I said, hell on earth. He said, I can imagine. He got a hold of Tim Robbie, and that's when I met Tim, and I got a pass, and I was on the sidelines with the Dolphins for that whole game. And I'll never forget. He never forgot Mike. He He never forgot my name. He never forgot even my brother Rick's name, even though he didn't like the University of Florida. And he was just a true gentleman to me all the way through. And I know both of you want to say something as well.
Go ahead, Dave. You
yeah.
had a lot of experience with him, as did I.
I did, actually. When I was doing the first team in the early days, Jimmy Cephalo left the show to get into television, to get back into television. So for a while, I went through, this is the 93, just a ton of people came through the door, either temporarily and knowing they were temporary, or trying to audition for the job. Like Tommy John, I worked with for a few shows, and a few people like that. Mercury was one of them. I think he lasted the longest, and I don't know if he was ever interested in doing sports talk radio full time. I remember he was a pretty intense guy. I was a little intimidated by him at this point. This is 30-some years ago. He was very thickly muscular, in tremendous physical condition, never shy about sharing an opinion with his personality. And so that, I'd say at least a month we did it until they ultimately, and I think wisely, picked Joe Rose, who sort of promoted Joe from weekends to but yeah, I remember Merck was, a very lively personality, to say the least. And I know the audience enjoyed having him. And of course, we got lots of conversations on the air about those teams, which are still beloved in this area and understandably well. So yeah, it's a player that, you don't have this kind of running back tandem that the Dolphins had anymore. You have shuffles at running back, but it's a little bit different. You had three different styles of football being played there, and all significant contributors as opposed to the way it is now.
Yeah.
Mark was great. I mean, if you look at him as a football player, I believe he's one of either 2 or 3 NFL players that had enough carries to qualify to be considered in the category of all-time rushing yards per carry leaders. He's one of 2 or 3 guys that averaged 5 yards per carry or more for his entire career. So he was an exciting element. A lot of different experiences with Mark. I moved here in 1981 from California, and the 72 team, they were so revered. It was interesting. We had a lot of interaction with them and the various players. Nice to see that most of these guys are in pretty good shape. Even now, the guys that are still around, I've run into a few recently at various events. And you're looking, going, okay, wow, this guy's doing well physically. Mark was as fit as anybody. Did he not look like he could have been a physical trainer? Even at, I didn't realize he was 77. He seemed like the least likely to have some kind of health issue. I mean, the guy was in phenomenal shape, but man, could he talk. And I remember when I first came here, it was around the time that he was sentenced in the cocaine case that he had against him. The judge, you may remember this person, Dave, especially, was in the news all the time. Ellen Morphonius Gable.
I sort of remember
like a hanging judge, and she had no mercy for anybody. If you were jaywalking, it was 12 years hard labor. She would like send you to the Gulag Archipelago, but she actually sort of was apologetic that she had to issue this minimum mandatory 15-year sentence on a Merck. Now, he became his own attorney. There's a little parallel there to kind of the Hurricane Carter story, except for the fact that Carter was completely innocent of what he was accused of and sent to prison for, but kind of became his own attorney and somehow found a way out far in advance of the 15 years. I don't know how many years he did, but when he came out, he was a philosophical gem, this guy. And if he collared you in the corner of a bar there, you'd say, well, there's Mercury Mars. The next hour, you were going to be just absolutely fascinated by whatever it was he was saying, even if you didn't understand it. He was that kind of guy. And then he had the big smile, the magnetic Magic Johnson smile, and he finished off everything that he said. Well, he would look at you knowing you were bewildered by what he had just said, and then give that really dynamic laugh that he had and flash that big smile, and you knew that everything was okay. So always made me feel good to be around Mercury Mars. I probably did 100 interviews with the guy and hung out with him at various times, did a lot of shows. And towards the end of, I guess it turned out to be the end of his life as well. Very touching the way that he was so close to Jim Kick after Jim Kick had suffered from dementia, and it was clear that he wasn't going to last much longer. And the closeness of Mercury Mars and Jim Kick is the kind of classic stuff that gets you into sports and makes you feel like it's really worthwhile to talk about, as opposed to maybe doing an epitaph on yesterday's Dolphin game. But no, I was a huge Mercury Morris fan. Always enjoyed any contact I had with him. He was always calling me with a new idea about a show. And whether we did it or not, it was just a lot of fun to be around this guy. And he's going to be sorely missed.
My brother said he didn't have Gale Sayers moves, but he had moves that were very difficult to bring him down. And he was shifty enough that if you got your arms around him, he could get away from you. I mean, he was just that good. And he said he was very difficult to bring down. And Jim Kick was not as hard to bring down, but he still had some pretty good moves too. And Dave, you're right. If it wasn't for that triad, I don't know if they would have gone 17-0. They might have still won a Super Bowl, but I don't know if they would have gone 17-0.
Well, they lost their number one quarterback. I mean, so although there's nothing against Earl Morrall, you didn't have Bob Greasy that year until the very end, until the playoffs. So it's you had to move the ball someplace. Oh, you also had a Hall of Fame wide receiver in Paul Warfield too on that team. But I think that running attack, which again you just don't quite see anything like that in the game today, as things have changed and coaches coach differently.
No, absolutely. All right, let's and our condolences to his family and God rest his soul, and may a flight of angels carry him safely to his rest. Yesterday's game in Seattle, gentlemen, I got to tell you something. I don't know what's going to happen when Tua returns. Eventually, he comes back in 3 weeks. Eventually, he's going to get concussed again at some point. Maybe sooner, maybe later, maybe not till next year. But at some point, he's going to get concussed again. What do the Dolphins finally say? We can't deal with this anymore. We got to get ourselves another quarterback, because it's maybe not now, 20 or 30 years from now, that's going to matter to this guy and his family. What happens? I mean, give me your opinions, gentlemen. I mean, to me, this guy should retire now. After watching my brother go through what he went through and other professional athletes that have been concussed so many times, I think he should retire now, because it's not now. It's 25, 30 years from now that suddenly it adds up. And suddenly you walk in the room, and Rick Volk, who's still a good friend of mine from those days in Baltimore, he doesn't know who he is or what he is or why he is. So your opinions, gentlemen. What do the Dolphins do if he gets concussed again? And you know that's going to happen at some point. And what does he do for his family?
What do you think, David? I'll let you tee that one up first.
First up, as far as the game, because I was out of town, I was in upstate New York, didn't get the Dolphins Seattle game, so I kept up with it as best I could. But as far as Tua goes, I mean, we can all sit here and tell him what to do, but he's clearly made up his mind what he wants to do, and he's going to take the short term over the long term, it looks like. And I happened to have a doctor who lives in my neighborhood, and we were out. He was walking his dog, I'm walking mine, and we had a conversation about this very thing. And from a medical perspective, he's disappointed that Tua is going to continue to play. I'm sure there are other doctors who feel the same way. And for all I know, there might be some who are like, don't worry about it. Just don't get concussed again. Or maybe he starts wearing that cap, that extra layer of protection that we don't know enough about yet as to find out whether that's going to actually help football players. And we won't know that for a while, really. So, we all want to tell him to retire, because nobody wants to see a Mike Webster out of him. Nobody wants to see Junior Seau. Nobody wants to see the players who have, I'm trying to think, who is it? Dave Duerson? Was that the
Dave Duerson,
in the chest?
Aaron Hernandez
shot himself in the chest so you could study his brain. That's what Dave Duerson did. Aaron Hernandez.
Yeah, Dave.
As a young man now, this is somebody who is much more closer to Tua's age when he died than Webster and some of these other people who ended up. Now, not every football player is going to have this, but not every football player has Tua's medical history. So, the Dolphins have enough problems keeping quarterbacks upright. You've lost Thompson for I don't know how long.
Yeah.
You've got a real revolving door there. So there's even more pressure on Tua to come back, because we don't know what this team's record's going to be when he's able to come back. And I'm sure he figures, I'll be fine. I'm young. I'll get through it. Team needs me. I'm making a lot of money. I've got to earn it. And another question, Jeff, was it a wise idea? And of course, this is all Monday morning stuff. Was it a wise idea to put a medical risk and put that kind of contract in front of him and, make him an offer he can't refuse?
I wish Stephen Ross owned a radio station. Don't you?
No. Oh, well, in that regard,
I would love to work for this guy. What are you kidding me? It doesn't matter what you do. how risky the proposition is. He was doling out cash. You see guys like Reddick holding out still with the Jets, and you had to the last second with C.D. Lamb and some of these other Dak Prescott contracts with the Cowboys. The Dolphins were just giving money away. It was like the Florida lottery. All of them, hey, you go into one of those money machines, you grab as many dollars as you can. Certainly it was risky business to give him this kind of guaranteed contract, given his injury history. Not just his injury history. How many guys at 19 break their hip? I got two good hips at 73. It doesn't happen that often. And I hate to label a guy as injury prone. You'll remember this guy. Remember when they labeled Yatil Green as being injury prone?
Oh, well, yeah.
And the Dolphins drafted him in the first round.
Well,
but the injuries were like,
he had
sort
a
of weird.
major knee injury was his problem.
But when he was injured in college, as this reputation was building and the risk, reward, theory was thrown out there. And the injuries were nothing that you would look at and go, my God, that's going to be catastrophic. And, of course, the first practice he goes out probably blows out his knee. So I don't like to label the guy injury prone, but you would have to say that has been somewhat the case with Tua, especially with the concussions. And having been around boxing most of my life and most of my professional career, I've seen a lot of this. I always go back to this. I remember I was covering a Super Bowl. I was on Radio Row in Arizona. This had to be 15 years ago or so. And that guy Nowitzki, the doctor from Harvard,
wrestler.
He started the whole thing about concussions and talking about it. So you can appreciate this, Dave, especially. I don't know, Gary, if you've been on a lot of Radio Rows for the Super Bowl, but guys walking around with a pamphlet, no PR crew with him or anything, and he's just asking anybody, can you put me on? And I remember I had like an empty block there. So I said, yeah, sure. Come sit down. He talks to me about all of this concussion stuff. And I thought, wow, this guy's out to lunch. What is he talking about? And the NFL was very quick to try and distance themselves from anything this guy was saying. They didn't really want him going on the shows or walking around Radio Row.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, it became something that they couldn't ignore anymore. And everybody was talking about it, concussions, this, and protocol, and all this stuff. But does it seem like to you that they've kind of sort of wiped the slate clean a little bit on this? That even though it's talked about, it's not really looked at with the level of severity that maybe it should be with the players involved. If you were really definitely and genuinely concerned,
I don't really think they've done enough, because I will go back even further, Jeff, and both of you remember this guy, John Mackey. He was the first one with the Baltimore Colts to have concussion issues. I know because my brother was good friends with John, and John retired in 74, I believe, or 73 after they won Super Bowl V. And immediately, his wife, who was a flight attendant for United Airlines, said he began walking in the rooms not knowing who he was. I went with my brother to have breakfast with he and his wife one morning, and I knew John from when I would go to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and along with David Shula and the Shula kids and the other kids hustling footballs around and the water bucket and everything. And he knew me very well. And then all of a sudden he came in to visit. He didn't know who I was anymore.
But wasn't he active in the NFLPA for a while after he retired, though?
Yes, for a couple of years he was.
He couldn't have been that, in that immediate a situation.
Oh, no. I don't mean immediate, but well, let's just say that within about 5 or 6 years of his retirement and trying to get this thing, because he knew something was wrong. He even knew back then.
Right.
Yes, you're right, David. It wasn't immediate. I guess I made it sound that way, and I apologize. But within a short period of time, and then when he died, I will tell you guys, he was one of my heroes. I mean, I cried my eyes out for John. And there were others back then, and the NFL ignored it, turned their back, didn't want to know anything.
Well, no, not then, because I think then let's not forget the attitudes were different, the finances were different. Just to use Tua as our example, he is much more financially important to the Miami Dolphins, and even though John Mackey, a Hall of Fame player, was to the Baltimore Colts, I think he finished in San Diego for a year. So that's the other thing we have to think about is the financial end of it. Back then it was, hey, you got your bell rung, get what, hey, Deforest, get in there for Allen, because he doesn't know
used
what
to be laughed at.
And not only that, Gary, you'd probably lose your job. If Jeff played, up to his capabilities, you'd lose your job. So guys would go ahead and ignore injuries. That's fortunately has changed. I think the NFL has changed rules. For example, if let's say Tua just got his bell rung and was okay, he still has to sit a game. So they've improved in that regard. They have the ability now for doctors to call down and say, look, get him off the field. We don't like what we see. So they've made some moves. Football players, I think, are always going to be football players, though. They realize the window isn't that big. The average career is pretty short, and they have to make what they can make. And also, I don't know if players love the game as much as they used to, because they probably know more about it, and there's so much darn money now out there that it might just be a money grab for most guys. But guys still want to play, and so they'll try to play through these things. And it's not easy to tell a guy to sit out unless there's literally a bone sticking out or they can't stand up.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that everybody comes to their senses, but I'm not counting on it.
Yeah.
Even from I remember the player Ricky Bell. And this made
Tampa Bay
perfect
and
sense.
USC he was
USC,
an incredible college player. Yeah,
tremendous college player, and he goes to the pros. And I remember him just taking an hellacious hit, like a Darryl Stingley type of hit, right to the head. And it was something that was kind of looked upon, as kind of a joke back then. And that wasn't that long ago. I mean, you're talking maybe, 20, 30 years ago. And the announcers at the game, he had his bell rung. Can you believe that? We'll see if he comes back. And that's the way it was perceived. So now at least, people are taking this with a little more of a dose of seriousness. It's hard to recommend to somebody that you're hanging up. This is his identity after all, and all the money in the world isn't necessarily going to change that. And I think certain players feel an obligation, like I have to be there for my teammates. They're counting on me, whatever. I mean, however much that means to them may override the logic and the rationale that would dictate that the guy sits down and seriously considers if he has any other options, one of which would be to collect the rest of this guaranteed money and go on and live a nice life.
Well, let me. I know we were planning on. Well, Gary, go ahead. Go ahead. I was
just going to say, but Dave Lamont, Jeff DeForest, Gary Allen with you here on Main Street, talking sports here this afternoon.
Well, what I was going to say, you want to do a time check too while you're at it? Or?
No. But take care of yourselves, would you please?
Now coming up, we're going to have some Sinatra. All right. Anyway, my point was
Hey! Don't talk about my next week's guest.
Well, I will have to be around for. So while we're doing this, since we have the ability to look stuff up, I went to the John Mackey page first on Wikipedia. Then it leads me to a CTE page.
Yeah.
And as of a 2023 Boston University study, 345 of 376 former NFL players who passed away, 345 of them had some type of this CTE.
Yeah. And
including people fairly young, in addition to people who develop it later in life. And I just don't know what you can do other than ban the game, and that's not going to be happening.
No.
It's too early to tell if these helmets are going to help. You can't completely change the way the game is played and take the head out of it. It's always going to be a risk. Because, when we first started getting targeting, that's another thing that was designed supposedly for the safety of the players in college football. One of the biggest arguments was always going to be, okay, I catch the ball. Here comes Jeff DeForest. He's going to just mash my brains in if he has the chance. That's what he's supposed to do. And so I see him. What do? Well, I'm going to be Mr. Tough Guy. I'm going to lower my head. Well, I'm going to lower my head at the same time he's lowering his. So he had no intention to hit me in the head necessarily, but we're going to collide anyway. Head-to-head contact, because I'm going to make a move to try to avoid getting hit. He's going to make a move to hit me. This happens routinely. This was a big controversy when targeting first came out. And you still see this kind of contact. In addition, we're playing on harder fields than ever before. And many of these injuries occur when guys do this. They get clobbered in the back of the head by the field, by the force of their fall, smashing their brain and their neck and all of that, getting concussed that way. So I just don't know what the solution is going to be. To the point where we know that football participation in youth is diminishing because parents, and I didn't let my kids play past 6 flag. They were 6 years old. They played flag for a year. That's all the football for you guys. And I didn't think of CTE. I was just thinking of the fact that it was a higher risk injury sport, especially for younger people whose bodies are developing. So I just didn't want them to do that, and they went on and played other things. But anyway, how about those Dolphins, Defo?
What a great game. I mean, it was great for me. For the life of me, and you can appreciate this being a degenerate, Dave Lamont, as well. I'm looking at this line, and I'm thinking, I know Seattle's no juggernaut. They struggled in overtime to beat the Patriots on the road the week prior. But when I saw Skylar Thompson, and rarely would I make any kind of a deduction that I thought had any foundation and truth in the preseason, but you could clearly see that the Dolphins, and you mentioned this earlier, Gary, I mean, in dire straits when it came to their backup quarterback. It's funny how, and you would love this also. I mean, being in talk radio for so many years, you would get the extremists back in the day, and of course, the Dolphins would lose the game, and now everybody needs to get fired. But there would be reason to bring up a lot of questions about the personnel decisions. You mentioned this. What do they do if Tua doesn't come back? I mean, it rhymes with ducked. They are there is such a drop off between whatever Tua was capable of doing and Skylar Thompson, who seemed in the system 3 years, showed some promise in his first year. Remember, there was sentiment on, hey, he should be the starter. But that quickly fell apart, as it often does when the backup comes in, usually has or sometimes has immediate success and then reverts back to showing you all the reasons why he was on the bench. In this case, this guy looks so far removed from anything that you could be successful with. And on top of that, I don't know. I really have some questions about Mike McDaniel. And I tried to stay out of this because we like the guy, don't we, Dave? I mean,
everyone seems to. Yeah.
Instead of a Ray Nitschke mentality, he's got like a Nietzsche sort of approach, and you're thinking, well, this is novel, this is refreshing, and he treats everybody very well, and is very good about ingratiating himself into the good opinions of the media. I want him to succeed, but I mean, how unprepared could you be for a ball game? I've never seen a worse coached game in my life. I mean, that's saying a lot. And that may be one of the most disappointing and depressing Dolphin games I've ever witnessed, except for the fact that I had a big bet, the bet of my lifetime, on the Seattle Seahawks in this game, because for the life of me, I could not understand. It's sort of like with the political race that's going on right now. I could not understand how, a certain person is accumulating even a single vote. I couldn't understand why people were sending in money on the Miami Dolphins in this game. It looked like a blatant mismatch, and that's what it turned out to be, although the Seahawks kind of hovered around there at 17-3, and if you're betting, you're thinking to yourself, don't screw me, Seattle. Whatever you do, don't let these guys hang around and get some meaningless touchdown and a field goal at the end of the game, and I lose to the spread. But
they almost did. I mean, it would have been meaningless even. What are they, 4th and goal to 2?
Yeah.
And they just can't convert. They can't, as Don Shula would say, execute. But it's 17-10 at that point would have been about 9 minutes to go in the game. And Seattle hadn't scored in hours, it seemed like. So that if that drive goes their way, we might have a completely different result. Who knows how Seattle would have reacted? Yeah. But what they ended up doing is going down there and putting in the absolute dagger touchdown, and going off with a W. They're Tim Boyle was with the Packers for a little while as a backup. I remember that. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember where we went to college. It sounds like a Boston College guy to me. I don't know where they're going to go for the next few weeks. And
I guess Huntley, they're trying to work him in there.
They've got him. He's a local or a Floridian, but they're backups for a reason. And it's don't have I'm speechless in a way because I'm looking at the statistics and like, who are the guys who have just as many catches or targets as Tyreek Hill? Who is this guy? Yeah. Who is that guy? You've got 2 receivers that are known for their brilliance. You've got a young running back, not a big back, more actually like a Mercury Morris size back, and he's running up the middle. I mean, are things that bad? And they may be at this point. And defensively, they've done okay considering that I don't know if they're going to recover this year from losing Christian Wilkins, but they are in disarray. And I don't know if even Tua is going to be able to save it if they don't start beating teams that are average.
Yeah. I want to switch gears here just a little bit. Bryce Young, he didn't play yesterday. The Panthers win. Is it time for the Panthers to say, hey, Bryce, nice knowing you. Goodbye.
Did that not consolidate some of the bus talk, though? I mean, Andy Dalton comes in there with the same team. Now, you're figuring Bryce Young seems like a very likable guy. Almost humble to a fault, maybe for a guy that plays this position. seemed lost every time that we watched them play, not just last year, but in the first couple of games this year. They're doing nothing. Same guys, Andy Dalton, not exactly a guy that's going to create all kinds of excitement across the board. And you're thinking, oh, good, Dalton's starting today, the old redhead. Throws for 300-plus yards, 3 touchdowns with the same lousy personnel, beats the Raiders, who just knocked off the Ravens on the road the week prior and killed everybody in survivor pools, as they're now known, that week. A lot of people eliminated in week number 2, including myself, taking the easy way, path of least resistance. Raiders looked like dog meat, and they win outright. So you're thinking they're riding a little bit of a wave, and they cave like that to Andy Dalton. You're asking yourself, how bad could this Bryce, how lost could he have been? They have a new coach there. His name I keep forgetting, but he's actually a guy that I listened to him speak, and I thought this guy's pretty inspiring, even though he's playing or he's going to be coaching in a really lousy organization.
Jeff, with their organization and their owner, he might only be there for 20 minutes anyway.
Possible, yeah, because he's had success. But that was a shocker. And if you were the people that were involved in the drafting and the trade for Bryce Young, which was just as lopsided as you could get right now, and also passing on C.J. Stroud, who's now an All-Pro. I mean, you would have to say this gets Jamarcus Russell off the hook, Dave. What do you think?
Oh, I think Russell's still going to be worse because I think he played way worse than Bryce Young ever did. The other thing that was interesting out of that game was the comments by the Raiders head coach, Antonio Pierce, who said there were guys making what he called business decisions out there. Now, that's coded talk for not giving your best effort, protecting yourself, maybe not playing as hard as you can, especially once Carolina established a huge lead, and there might be a tendency to let up a little bit and protect yourself. So obviously there's problems in that organization as well, and there'll be questions about whether Antonio Pierce is the right guy to coach that. So it was an interesting day yesterday for things that either went off the rails, or in the case of, I don't know how the hell Kansas City ever wins a game these days, but they still do. You've got Pittsburgh at 3-0, and everybody was starting to write them off.
The Ravens won.
Minnesota, Sam Darnold having a mini revival of a career that most people talk about, guys who are backups.
Sure.
And he gets an opportunity because of injury, and it's the darling of the league through admittedly, just a few weeks. It was a weird day yesterday for some of the things that I was able to watch, or I certainly have read about coming home today. It was just a very, very strange week.
The only reason my guys won, they played the Chicago Bears. I mean, I have, something.
Okay, wait a minute. There are people right now from Baltimore who are standing outside your
Indianapolis
dwelling with pitchforks and torches.
Yes.
I am shocked that a Baltimore Colts fan would stay with that franchise, considering what happened. But anyway, I had to get that in.
For years, I didn't follow the Colts, even though I lived in Chicago. I just, as a matter of fact, I'm waning away from pro football more, and I'm more into college football now. Dave, you know that. And I want to get into this real quick here. Billy Napier, how soon? What's the over and under, Jeff, on him getting fired?
Well, I mean, they won this past week, which was good, and they covered the point spread, which was a shocker.
Mississippi State's really bad.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look good. I would imagine the patience is not going to be really strong there. The names that are being floated don't seem like they would be likely contenders. I don't know. Lane Kiffin is really going to leave Ole Miss, where he's writing his own score every week and come and coach the Gators. I'm not sure that would be a move that he would make. There's been
be great for the Gators, but it would not be great for Lane.
Yeah, I mean, other mentions. I don't know. You know what? You would think that naturally, this is Ed Ogeron time for him. Definitely being speculated as being on the hot seat. I mean, the other guy that keeps getting talked about as potentially getting fired is Mike Norvell, which I find surprising because I would think this, Dave, and you've been around college football a long, long time. You have a year where you go unbeaten. Do you not get a little bit of a pass-a-roo?
Yes, absolutely.
In the ensuing season, no matter what happens?
He, like other people, just apparently made a bad personnel decision with the quarterback. And so he's got to live with it this year, it looks like. But no, I'm not walking away from Norvell. I'll let the crybabies go ahead and cry. Napier's been on the hot seat since the season started.
Yep.
And they're on a bye week this week, and I was just checking. They have a very interesting non-conference game in the Swamp, and it's UCF. And that's a decent UCF team
Yes, it
that
is.
looks at this game as, oh,
Our
so you
Super
guys
Bowl.
have been looking down on us because you're in the SEC and, well, now we're in the Big 12, but the UCF has always had that kind of attitude. As USF tried to take against University of Miami, didn't quite work. Didn't work at all. But UCF's a little bit of a different case. They have some history behind them. So that game is going to really fry if Florida plays poorly. Now, again, Mississippi State is awful. They lost the week before to Toledo. So, and that game was in Mississippi State, not Toledo. So they've got their own issues. And so Florida winning there wasn't that big a surprise. They need to figure out which guy is our quarterback. Are we going with the old guy or the young guy?
Yeah.
I don't like this 2 quarterback nonsense. So he's got to be like Mertz had a good day. So maybe he's going to have the job for a while and go let Lagway build his way in. But,
FSU won 14-9, but I don't see anything impressive about their 14-9 victory. And
well, they're offensively challenged, tremendously offensively challenged.
Yeah.
And 14, they really probably shouldn't have won. Cal's not all that bad, but you get them to travel all that way, and they've already traveled that way once, and when they beat Auburn. Speaking of people who are having problems, but I don't consider that the victory that's going to. And look, they're already out of the playoffs. Even with 3 losses and a brand name like Florida State, that's not going to the brand name's not going to save them here. This isn't the 3-loss Notre Dame team we're talking about.
Yeah.
So and they'll lose 1 or 2 along the way. Although the ACC is looking a little rough this year with what happened with North Carolina. Getting.
Can you believe that?
No, I really can't. I'm stunned.
That's your
belief.
guy. Is he all right?
Yeah, I haven't talked to him, but he offered to resign after the game. So I guess the answer to that is a firm no. And the one team that we all kind of crapped on after the opening game was Clemson. They played Georgia the opening game, who's been known to crap on people, and like Florida State or the shell of a team that was Florida State. And all of a sudden, Clemson, it looks like very lively and maybe one of the 2 or 3 best teams in a very muddy ACC at the moment. So.
I watched the University of Miami game, and the only question mark that I have, guys, Cam Ward's all over the field, throwing the ball over the field. USF gave him a good game for the first half. Is Miami's running game? Maybe am I missing something? Are you, Dave, worried?
Well, did Mark Fletcher play? Is Fletcher playing? I did not.
Yes,
Again,
Fletcher played. He scored. Jeff, what did he scored? What? 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns?
That I don't know.
I'm going to look at a box score while you're talking.
I was looking at the way that they were executing the running game the week prior.
Yeah.
Against Ball State they played at home, and I thought this is the most unimaginative running game I've ever seen. And then of course, Cam Ward was lighting it up, so it really didn't make any difference. I thought we were going to get the Cristobal factor in this game early on, the way that first half was going, that he was going to find a way to find the ruination of the Hurricanes, but they proved to be too strong. And it's Cam Ward, that pass he threw to open things up when he hit like the 80-yard touchdown pass.
Yeah,
dropped it in there perfectly. Almost threw it like he was Kent Tekulve from his hip. Really, how much the kind of talent that they've needed there for a long time at the quarterback position. So I don't even think Mary can screw this up with the cupcake schedule.
Gary, Fletcher only had 3 carries for a couple of yards. It was Martinez, the transfer.
Oh, okay, all right.
Who had the touchdowns, and then you had Lyle, who had kind of a statistical oddity: 6 carries for 104, but 1 carry was for 91. So No, I think Jeff, that's the thing that's driven everybody crazy about Miami, and it's not just Mario, but you go through the history of all their head coaches. In the last 5 hires, every one of them has 1 or 2 utterly inexplicable and unexplainable defeats to so-called lesser teams, from the Louisiana Techs and the FIUs and Middle Tennessee, and ACC teams that aren't very good. They would lose to once or twice a year, and all of a sudden your 9-3 season looks 7-6 if you're lucky, and then they go to a bowl game and they stink it up. They play listlessly in these smaller bowl games. So I'm pleased with the result of that. There's more of that coming. There's more of these types of games. They're going to have. We mentioned Cal. That is a game I've marked with some concern, because it's going to be Miami going out there, a weird to Hurricanes environment. Cal has got a good coach in Justin Wilcox. and they're a pretty good team, not a great team, but this is the kind of game that in past years Miami would lose, and I
Yeah.
think it's going to say a lot when they get to that part of the schedule how they do.
I love Restrepo.
Yeah.
That kid's fun. I mean, very entertaining. He was great last year. He had a thing going with Van Dyke, and he seems to have picked it right up with Cam Ward. So they have some entertaining components
Yep.
on the team. The Cal thing, I do have to mention this. I have a program called Bury Your Bookie. We bring on various handicappers.
Mhm.
You can imagine the concept is to try and find some winners. And we had a guy that very good handicapper, and he made the biggest bet of his life, he said, on Florida State. He knew the Cal coach, and he thought that the 3-0 record was a little fugazi.
Mhm.
And he thought laying 2 at home for FSU, this was a game that if they don't win that one, there's a chance they get off to an 0-5 start. I think they have SMU coming up next week. Not going
That'll
to
be
be an
tough.
easy game for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, he's thinking there's no way they end up starting a season 0-5, and they lose this game at home, a night game against a Cal team that might be overrated based on their results so far, although they did cover a fat spread against San Diego State the week prior. He bets everything he's got. I mean, he was taking out mortgages, loans, all kinds of stuff. He was at pawn shops. And were it not for 2 missed mid-range field goals by the kicker for Cal,
Yeah.
he loses to the point spread. I mean, the FSU still wins the game, but he fails to get the cover. So you need a lot of luck in this, in this life, and that certainly was fortunate for him. But I'm looking at that, going, my God, just bizarre luck. His kicker was pretty good. He made a few kicks in the game. Misses 2 like 38 yarders. Oh, we have a whole different story because the scary part for FSU is, and I thought the ukulele kid, and I'm butchering the pronunciation of his name, but not by design. It's just the way I've always known him. I thought he showed signs of life last year. You noticed from horse racing, Dave.
Well, at Oregon State, though. But at Oregon State, the different environment. Yeah, I think he might have been better off.
I didn't think it was a bad move to bring him in there, though. I thought it was
I thought he should have stayed under the spot, away from the spotlight. He had trouble with the spotlight at Clemson, and he seems to be having some trouble with it at Florida State. Whereas at Oregon State, there is some spotlight out there, but most of the nation is not paying attention to you, even though they had a good coach in Smith, who's now at Michigan State. But I think that he got about as far away from Dabo and Clemson as he possibly could going into Corvallis. And
keep in mind too, guys, this is a whole FSU team that's they're players from last year, but they're almost revamped in a sense, and they're just not playing together. The reason he came to FSU is because they are going to play Clemson. Dave, you got your computer in front of you. They play Clemson at some point or another. Before next week's game, this Friday night for Miami, I watched Virginia Tech. If they commit half of the penalties and the screw-ups that they did this past weekend, Miami will have another easy victory. Jeff, did you catch it?
NC State?
Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech. No, I didn't see that game.
They were terrible. They were
they are terrible. They got beat by Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt later got beat by Georgia State. So it's not a traditional. I think there's a coach who's in some trouble for keeping his job is Brent Pry at Virginia Tech because they're struggling. I'm looking for FSU. They play Clemson the same weekend that Miami goes to Cal. So they play Clemson, and it's in South Carolina. And they also have Notre Dame on their schedule. That should be a loss. So they may wind up with 5, and if Miami beats them, probably 6 defeats. They'll be fighting to get into. They won't get to the Pop-Tarts Bowl, the greatest prize in all of sports. Is the hot fly Pop-Tart that shows up that's put in your locker room when you win. So they're not even going to make the Pop-Tart Bowl.
Absolutely. Dave Lamont, Jeff Deforest, Gary Allen with you here on Main Street. They'll be back October 7th to join us for some more sports. I love these two guys very much. Of course, Dave and I are from 2 brothers from another mother, but that's all right.
Dave, did you just celebrate? Did I see that right? 50 years as a broadcaster? That seems impossible.
51 now. If you go back to the absolute debut, the first time I had a microphone in my hand and there were people in a venue, it was my high school year, my freshman high school year at George C. Marshall High in Virginia. And I was certainly in the top 5% of the absolute worst teenage athletes in all of North America.
I can't see that the way you played
Well,
basketball
it's funny, Jeff. I think I was a
in
better
Miramar.
athlete later in life than I was as a teenager. It was just awful. I got
Okay.
cut from the freshman basketball team. That's back in the days when you had varsity, junior varsity, and freshman.
And everybody
Yeah.
made the team. Yeah.
Not me. However, puberty hit at the right time,
Oh,
and
beautiful.
I got pipes at a young age. And they made an announcement. We're looking for a student to do public address announcing for sporting events. And I went to the athletic director and a man named Herb Yost, and went to Mr. Yost and said, I'm interested. And
Yeah.
you know what, Default and Gary, you guys, we have about 1,000 years combined radio and television experience. The greatest career advice I ever got was from the athletic director, Herb Yost. Mr. Yost said to me, he's trying to give me some pointers, and he said, "Oh, one more thing, yes, sir. What's that? When in doubt, say nothing."
There
Yes.
you go. Yeah.
Yes.
Never
Yes.
forgot that. Wish
Yes.
I had practiced it much more in real life as well as in a professional life, but it's an incredible piece of advice, and it's 51 years
Yes.
later. But yeah, Jeff, the only time I was like really off the air, right about not long after you hit town, I had lost a job at WNWS, and that's when I went to Dania High Life for 7 years and did little bits of radio and here and there. And I think actually might have been I don't know if you left Wins or if Steve Shane left Wins, and they needed an afternoon guy in the late 80s.
I think it was Jeff. Wasn't it you, Jeff?
No, I was out of there for.
It had to be Shane Man then.
Yeah, I started at Winds in the early 80s. I moved here in 81. Probably got a job there maybe early 1982. And was there for about 4 years.
Okay, you were out. So
and then I moved on to other things.
I was at Zeta when I was at the University of Miami doing weekends, overnights, 12 at night till 6 in the morning for $5.55.
Oh, listen, when I was auditioning at Winds and I was still working only Highlight, it was an Olympic year. It was 88. They needed a replacement. So I would come in, and they hadn't gone fully all news at that point. There was some weird quirk in the format. I would go in for like a week or 2 weeks, record one sportscast a day, record it, leave, and I got $8 each time I did it.
That was one of the unfortunate circumstances I experienced when I moved here. I think I was telling a story last time we were on the show together. Came here from L.A. A guy told me, "Hey, you can get a job right off the streets there. It's a major market. It's like number 12 or 13 in the country, and your chances of going from where you are right now onto the airwaves here in L.A. are 0.0. So go there and get a job and see if you can't make it work." And what he didn't tell me, though, is that the jobs didn't pay anything, because there was a union shop there in Los Angeles, and the guys were making pretty good money. And I came here, and I was talking with our good buddy Ron Harrison.
Sure.
And he was outlining what the pay was, and then I got my first check. And my wife, I just got married, and was about to have like a child, and she said, "We can't live on this." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right."
Yep.
I better find something else to do.
I'll take care of it.
Yeah. Well, I ended up scrambling into starting a little television company, and that turned out to be pretty worthwhile for me in the long run.
Same thing as me when I started doing stand-up comedy. It was like my wife in L.A. She met me in L.A. and I was doing emceeing for Bud Friedman at the Improv and everything.
Oh, nice! I used to go out there.
Yeah. Well, listen, I lived right off of Melrose. I lived right at North Kings Road, not far right out of Beverly Hills. And Grace was in the advertising business. She worked for Jay Wally. And, but I would get like $25 for the night to MC a show and put up with all the beers and stuff being thrown at me. And my wife turned to me and she said, "Gary, I love you, but I bring in more money in 2 minutes than you bring in doing a whole night at the Improv." And that's when I went to Bud Friedman and said,
"You're pursuing your dream."
Well, yeah, I was, because I was also down the road at the Groundlings, where I was there for 2.5 years as a performer. Thank God for Robin Williams. Wasn't for him, I wouldn't have gotten in there to begin with. But it was through him I got to meet Costner. Kevin and I are still friends to this day. Matter of fact, next month when my birthday arrives, I'll get a phone call either before or after. "Hey, happy birthday, schmuck," and he hangs up.
Nice. Yeah, I got to know all of those guys. I think I mentioned this last time also. when I was living in LA, my girlfriend's brother was the unknown comic. And
Oh, yeah,
Murray
yeah.
Langston is his name, and he's still around doing stuff.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, and he actually this is great because desperation is the mother of invention, and often leads as a rather rich road to success. Murray was kind of on the balls of his rear end, and he was trying to make ends meet. And he called Chuck Barris and said, "I really need, just to make scale today, anything." He says, "Come in, I'll put you on the Gong Show." He said, "Well, I can't go on as myself." He was already like an accomplished comedian and had been on many shows, and successful shows in Hollywood, and was friends with all of these top comedians. So he says, "Okay, I'm going to put a bag on my head and tell a bunch of really corny jokes, and I'll go on as the unknown comic." And that's how he started the thing. He ended up doing, I don't know, however many hundreds of appearances there. And
Still does it.
I developed it into a Vegas act and became very prominent. But he had a club called the Showbiz where all these guys used to show up in the Valley. And I remember at the time, the big thing was that they were fighting. They were hoping that Mitzi from the Comedy Store would give them Mitzi Shore, right? Would pay comedians. They were pressing. They went on strike to see if they could get $10 a shot every time they went up there.
My guest next week is Tom Dreesen, who started that strike.
He was big there at Murray's Club also.
Yeah, he was great. And Johnny Dark, who was also part of that.
Johnny Dark, one of the greats.
At the Comedy Store. I never performed up at the Comedy Store. I was always down at the Improv. It was like a separation of people. But yeah, Tommy's on with me next week, my good buddy from Chicago, and we're going to have fun. Let's switch gears. We got about 7 minutes left. Quickly, my Phillies are a big disappointment. I don't think they're going to last very long.
Gary.
Huh?
You're in the playoffs.
They're in first place.
Yeah, but
I'm going to stop you right here. I'm going to stop you right. Don't
come on,
you dare.
Dave.
How
Did
disappointing.
You see them against the Mets?
Don't
you see them against the Mets? Did you see them against the Mets, Dave?
Oh, a game. Ooh.
No, 3 out of 4 they lose.
Ooh. No.
3 out of 4 they lose.
No. Don't even start. Don't go down that road.
All right, your Orioles. Are they going to make it?
Not doing well. If they do, there might be last man who's not on the injured list. Turn out the lights. That's unfortunately has contributed to this mini collapse where they have lost their last 5 series. So if they make it, it's probably going to be. Last year when they made it, there was some hope that they could make a run until they ran into Texas, who had very hot bats.
Yeah.
And this year, there's no hope if they make it. If they are able to wiggle their way through in the wild card, they're not going to win the division. But yeah, it's just they've been hit with a ton of injuries especially on the pitching staff, and just being in contention is probably a minor miracle. So I don't have very high hopes for that. But if they make it, that would be nice.
Yankees.
Watch your language. Because now here's what we're about to walk into. We're about to be
Jeff. He loves me till I bring that stuff up.
No, it's just they're fine. I mean, all their people bitch and whine all the time too, and I'm tired of them. But the other things you mentioned, Yankees. You have the Cowboys, who've been the national game of the week now 3 weeks straight on Fox. They're 1-2. Their last 3 home games, counting the playoff game in January, they have not just been beaten. Well, they got weird late against Baltimore, but let's face it, they were not the better team in that game, and it showed ultimately. They couldn't tackle Derrick Henry. They didn't try to tackle Derrick Henry. They played like they were scared of him.
Yeah.
But yet, I'm sure they're going to be on some damn network next week that everyone's going to have it shoved down their throat. So I'm about done with those guys.
Dodgers.
Well, I mean, what had just happened here the other day is something that no sports fan who's got any kind of intelligence at all will ever forget.
Was that beautiful or what?
It really was. I mean, this is something we may never see again. And at least we've been alive to see it as baseball fans. In such a statistic-driven, numbers-loving sport, there's no more numbers-loving sport than baseball. Yeah. And, what he did, and then the way he did it, it wasn't like he cheesed out some greasy last day, pop-up that snuck over a fence something. He had the greatest individual day in the history of the sport.
And he's not done. But by the way, we will never see that again if he starts pitching next year.
Well, and he probably will. I mean, he is pretty damn good at it.
There is some sentiment that he might pitch in the postseason.
Yes, he might be a reliever.
I have to just vicariously root for the Dodgers. I have a friend who's a pretty big gambler. And he puts
I knew there was going to be that tie was coming.
It's very surprising.
Yeah. How did you think
And
that was going to get in there, Dave? That he
well,
was
I mean,
gambling friend?
Well, I
he
missed the
made a,
first 7 references, but I knew I'd
he
get
made a
one of them.
parlay earlier this year or prior to this year. He had UConn to win the national championship in basketball. I put $100 on this. UConn to win the national championship in basketball, they win it. He had the Panthers to win the Stanley Cup, they win it.
Yeah.
He had the Celtics to win the NBA championship, they win it. And the fourth component of this to win 90,000 for his 100 is the Dodgers to win the World Series. Now, the question would be, and it almost gets into a situation like you're on the Price is Right or whatever, but not that. What would be the game where where you have to decide whether to take the box or the curtain?
Oh, well, let's make a deal.
Let's make a deal. I mean, do you hedge out of that at this point? I mean, you would think that you would have to 100 to win 90,000, or you just let that ride all the way because. I mean, the Dodgers are right now seemingly riding a real magical wave, ignited by Ohtani, who I'm sure both of you guys have been to baseball games that you would consider to be memorable. I happen to be at Jim Bunning's perfect game in 1964 on Father's Day. I was actually in the stands. I was among the 387,000 that stayed at the game.
So
I was there.
I.
Yeah, Shea Stadium. First year is Shea.
I'm not complaining about it.
But I've covered the Angels when they had Nolan Ryan and he was throwing no hitters every other night. So I've seen a lot of good stuff. Dodger World Series games.
Yeah.
Was behind home plate there for the '97 win by the Marlins. But imagine being at that game. That would have to be as legendary a performance as you could possibly conjure up. And he would have also hit for the cycle in that game, except he got thrown out at third base. Almost on like a Cookie Rojas kind of move where he was thrown out by 20 feet. But he was about to stretch his double to left center into a triple earlier in the game before he started hitting the home runs, and he would have included the cycle for that.
Are we literally watching? Are we literally watching who will end up when it's all said and done, the greatest baseball player to play?
You have to consider the pitching. I mean, he pitches to. He was with the Angels, who were not a winning franchise, probably around a 500 club, and he pitched to like a 667 winning percentage, 3.01 earned run average, and struck out 11 guys per 9 innings. So
he's got some vicious stuff. I don't know if he's going to have that stuff when he comes back, but it seems like every other pitcher is getting this type of injury and this type of surgery. And so there's certainly people who've come back from it and pitched well. So if he still can throw some of this filthy stuff he has, then he's going to be a candidate for that title, no doubt.
Yeah. People think Tommy John was a doctor. That's the funny part.
Well, considering how many
I remember him pitching.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he came back from the surgery as a changed pitcher.
Yeah,
after he had the Tommy John.
Yeah, but I think when
surgery.
you're the first guy, you're never going to do. You're going to learn. So guys will come back throwing probably just about as hard as they did.
Or even better, in some cases.
On the 7th, we'll pick the World Series, who we think is going to win it because we'll be closer. We'll be in the playoffs.
I think the Phillies have been eliminated already, Gary. It's incredible. It's true. So this will give you a chance on October 7th to complain about how they got.
I just don't think they're hitting very well. That's all. They're not hitting.
First place, won the division. Yeah, they're awful.
They're just not hitting. All right. What's the one team in the playoff? What's the one team in the playoffs? American League, National League. With the 2 minutes we got left, you do not want to play against, no matter who you are.
I don't know. Does Carlos Beltran still have the bongo drums and the garbage cans?
Yes.
Belt out the signals there in the dugout. The Astros, even though everybody hates them because of the whole cheating scandal, they're always dangerous, aren't they? I mean, they really are. I don't think
incredibly experienced.
Yeah.
I'd like to buy into Cleveland more. I've even seen them in person this year. I just don't think that they can string together long rallies for many runs. They've got maybe the best closer in the game right now. So I think the Yankees are dangerous because Judge is so dangerous.
Yes.
The guy who can single-handedly tilt a game. And in the National League, I think we already talked about it, the Dodgers seem to be magical this year, and they would have to be the National League favorite. Favorites don't always win. We know that, but good Lord, they've got a lot of talent besides Ohtani, and they look like the best.
Yeah. Hey guys, the hour is dead. I want to thank you both very much. You're going to be back October 7th. We'll talk more sports then. The playoffs will have begun. My Phillies will be eliminated according to Dave by then. Thank goodness.
No, that's according to you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I wasn't really quite sure.
You pay attention.
They're only
okay.
like 11 games up, you know.
Yeah, they're just awful. Gosh,
Killing it in
dang.
the National League East,
I
where
fully
everybody was
expect
trying.
a complete change of management, and
Dombrowski's got to go.
it's time to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
something.
Dombrowski's
does-
got to go.
What does he
real
know
quick,
about winning titles? Nothing. I mean, come on.
I'll tell
What
you.
does he
I'll tell
know?
you what though. I'll tell you what though. The man, wherever he goes, he does build a winner. He does build winning ball clubs. I'm
Yes.
telling you. Is he still married to Kerry Ross or no?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, very
Absolutely.
happily so, I believe.
Yeah.
I-
Yeah.
Anyway,
You know
Dave,
what? I was in on that. I remember Dave came into the studio, and there were two very attractive female sportscasters when it wasn't that popular to have women sportscasters, and Carrie was one of them. She had just started working in town here, and I forget, it's a young lady at Channel 7, and I had them
Deb
both.
Kaufman?
Might have been, yes, and they both came to my studio one night to do a talk show, and because I was trying to feature them and say, hey, this is great expansion, women getting into sportscasting, and Dave came along as he was like the next guest after these two young, very attractive young ladies left the studio, and he was asking me about Carrie Ross a little bit, and at the time, and I think he was kind of flipping a coin, like which one he was more attracted to. It turns out he had a way with the ladies, and sure enough, he started dating Carrie Ross, and the next
No, actually, we never got
they
that
were
far.
married.
Never. Oh, that Dave. I thought you meant me, Dave.
No, you. I mean,
no. The great irony on that is also, ironically, Deb Kaufman winds up marrying Ed Placey, who was my boss at ESPN all the time that I was there, and is still there as a coordinating college football producer.
Okay, guys, we have run out of time, and I've got to say goodbye.
All right.
So, Jeff DeForest, Dave Lamont will be back October 7th. Gary Allen here for Main Street. Take care of yourself. God bless you, and have a great one. Tommy?
Can you hear me?
Did he fall asleep during the show?
Oh.
Always was disappointing when you would look in the production room and the producer was asleep.
I don't know.
Morning drive will do that to you for sure. I mean, it's excusable.
Still recording. All right, we're still recording. Anyway.
Let's keep our clothes on.
Yeah.